Okay, so let us continue the discussion on composition levy scheme. In the last lecture, I discussed with you composition levy scheme, which is defined under section 10 of the CGST Act. And what broadly I discussed in the last lecture, that the scheme, composition levy scheme, is nothing but a scheme which will simplify the processes for middle businessmen or small businessmen, you can say. Whatever was the purpose of presumptive taxation scheme under Income Tax Act, same purpose is there under composition levy scheme under GST laws. So the purpose is same, to simplify the procedure and process for the people who are paying the tax to the government of India, whether it is direct tax or indirect tax. So composition levy scheme simplifies the process of GST. If you remember, under this composition levy scheme, which I discussed with you in the last lecture, there are two cases, one normal case and one special case. Special case I haven't discussed with you. I discussed in the last class normal case. And what is the normal case? That whenever you are a registered person, and if your aggregate turnover of last financial year, or you can say preceding financial year, did not exceed 1.50 crore rupees, or in case of 8 states, 8 different states, the turnover is not 1.50 crore, it is 75 lakh rupees. If this is the situation, then you have an option as a registered person, you have an option to pay the tax as per those rates which are mentioned under composition levy scheme, and the rates mentioned here are very less. So there are three different types of suppliers who can be covered under this composition levy scheme: normal circumstances, manufacturer, restaurant service provider, and other eligible suppliers. If you remember, in case of restaurant, the current central tax rate under composition levy scheme in case of manufacturer is 0.5%. In case of restaurant service provider, the current rate of tax under composition levy scheme as far as central tax is concerned is 2.5%, and in case of other suppliers, the rate is 0.5% of taxable turnover. In case of manufacturer and restaurant service provider, it is the percentage on the basis of total turnover, which includes taxable as well as exempt. But in case of other supplier, the percentage 0.5% is only on taxable value of the turnover. This is what I discussed. Now, these rates are only central tax. You have to add equal amount of state tax or union tax, whatever is the situation, and you will get the total GST rate. This is what I discussed in the last lecture. So I will now continue another section, or you can say subsection of section 10, which is section 10 subsection 2. Let me show this. First of all, let me show you this act, and then I will simplify the language. So this is what we were discussing in the last lecture, composition levy, and I discussed only section 10 subsection 1 only in the last class, only 10(1). Now I will continue my discussion to this section 10 subsection 2, and what this act says: the registered person shall be eligible to opt under subsection 1 if, so there are so many conditions involved. Now, just because I am a registered person, just because my aggregate turnover of last financial year did not exceed the limit of 1.50 crore or 75 lakh as the case may be, it does not make me that person by default who can opt for composition levy scheme. No, I need to check other criterias also. Just because I am a registered person, just because my turnover didn't exceed those limits, it doesn't mean that I can opt for composition levy scheme. I need to check whether I am fulfilling all other criteria or not. So that is why I need to refer section 10 subsection 2, that who can opt or who cannot opt. So let me simplify the language directly, and let me tell you who cannot opt for composition levy scheme, who cannot opt for composition levy scheme. So I will simply explain now section 10 subsection 2. If you remember, this was the discussion going on. Normal case or special case. So in this scheme, there are two categories: normal cases or special case. This topic I left. I told that we will discuss later. So yes. So let us continue normal case. So normal case is covered under 10.1, that who can opt for composition levy scheme. But now I will cover 10.2 also. This is also normal case. And what 10.2 says, let me simplify. This section says that non-applicability in the following cases. In the following cases, which I will tell you now, the composition levy scheme is not available. First point. Now, first point is what? When a registered person, if the registered person is engaged in outward supply, and this outward must be interstate. So you can write here interstate outward supply of goods or services. This is first point. Outward supply means sales. Inward supply means purchases. That is the only difference. Outward supply means my sales. Inward supply means my purchases. So when I'm doing my sales between two states, you can say I'm in Haryana and I'm supplying the goods in Delhi, then my outward supply is interstate. I cannot opt for composition levy scheme. It is not allowed to me. I cannot opt. I am ineligible to opt for composition levy scheme. But there is no restriction on interstate supply. I can purchase interstate. There is no problem. But I cannot sell interstate if I want to avail the scheme of composition levy. For example, let me clarify. For example, Mr. A is in Delhi supplying goods. So supplying goods or services to Mr. B, Tamil Nadu. So it is interstate supply. It is interstate supply because two states are involved. A cannot opt for composition levy. This is first point. A cannot opt for composition levy scheme. Clear. Interstate outward supply, ineligible person. Another example. I hope this example is clear. Another example of the same point. Another example. Mr. P, Delhi, supplying Mr. Q, Delhi. But Mr. P is purchasing from whom? R. Purchasing from Mr. R, who is in Punjab. Now, can you tell me whether Mr. P is eligible for composition levy or not? Can you tell me this? This is my question. Is Mr. P eligible for composition levy? Can anyone make an attempt to tell me the answer on the basis of what point I wrote? Hurry up, please try to make an attempt if you can. Is Mr. P eligible for composition levy scheme? Whether Mr. P will opt for composition levy scheme or not, that is a different concern. But is Mr. P eligible? This is my question. Is Mr. P eligible? Can anyone try? Hurry up. Try to tell me, is Mr. P eligible or not? Answer is yes. Answer is yes, he is eligible. Why? Because he may be purchasing, his interstate supply may be his not interstate supply, his inward supply may be interstate, doesn't matter. But my outward supply must not be interstate. So my outward supply is intrastate, happening within same state. So it does not matter whether I am purchasing from the same state or not, it doesn't matter to me. For the purpose of the composition levy scheme, this person is eligible to opt for composition levy scheme. Please raise your hand if this point is clear. So I'll proceed. If you have understood this point, please raise your hand. Okay, if you have any problem, you can ask me. So I'm proceeding now. So I've discussed first case when the person who is not eligible to opt for composition. Now second case, when you cannot opt for normal case of composition levy scheme, if the registered person is a casual taxable person. If the registered person is a casual taxable person, he cannot opt for composition levy scheme. What do I mean by casual? As the name suggests, casual. That means this businessman is not a regular businessman. He's a casual businessman. He is doing the business when any occasion comes, like at the time of New Year. Maybe this person is doing some business at the time of some celebration on account of Diwali. This person is doing the business, or at the time of Eid, this person is doing the business, at the time of Guru Purab, at the time of Christmas. So when these occasions come, where different religions, the people who follow different religion participate in their own festivals, so at that time the sales may be high related to those products who are in demand at that time of those festivals. So there may be so many businessmen who will do the business only for some time period. On Deepavali, you can see there are so many businessmen who do the business of crackers, who become trader in cracker business, because at that time the sale of cracker become high. So it depends upon situation to situation. So any person who is a casual taxable person, now technically there is a definition of casual taxable person which I am not telling to you right now, that I will discuss later on. But a person who is a casual taxable person, that person cannot opt for composition levy scheme. Similarly, third, if is a non-resident taxable person. Similarly, if anyone is non-resident taxable person, a non-resident can also do the business here. There is no problem. If that non-resident person is there, then that person can also not opt for composition levy scheme. Fourth, if the registered person is engaged in supply of those goods and services which are not leviable to GST. On those supplies where central tax is not at all applicable, then composition levy scheme is not at all available for those people. There may be so many goods on which the central tax is zero, you can say, nil rate, or not at all levied. On every import, you can say, on every import and export is by default treated as interstate supply as defined in the act. So when you do any import, of course, central tax is not applicable. So that importer cannot say that I want to opt for composition levy scheme. It's not allowed, because if you are engaged in supply of those goods and services, or when you are not the importer, you can say, when say that you are exporter, because now it's the concept of supply. So when you are exporter, you can say, then every exports are treated as interstate. Central tax is not applicable on those. On every exports, IGST is there. So exporters cannot ask for composition levy scheme. It's not allowed, because whenever you are engaged in supply of those goods and services which are not leviable to central tax, then on those supplies, the registered person cannot opt for composition levy scheme. So these are the 4 points. When you are engaged in interstate outward supply, casual taxable person, non-resident, or you are engaged in supply when those supplies are not leviable to central tax. Fifth point now. Fifth point. If the registered person is engaged in supply of following goods. Following notified goods. So some of the goods are specially notified that in case you are a supplier of following goods, then you cannot ask for composition levy scheme. Pan masala, tobacco, aerated waters, just like soda water, where some chemicals are added and the nature of water is changed. So soda water is an example. We call it as aerated water, where some air is added basically. And fourth is ice cream. In these cases, you cannot opt for composition levy scheme if you are a supplier of these products. Sixth, if the registered person is engaged in supply of goods or services through an electronic commerce operator, on which this electronic commerce operator is liable to collect tax at source, on which the concerned electronic commerce operator under section 52. No, section is not necessary for you to learn, but if now who are ECOs who are providing the platforms, like Flipkart is an ECO, Amazon, okay, Snapdeal, etc. If any registered person is engaged in supplying those goods and services through these platforms, electronic commerce operator platforms, where electronic commerce operator is under an obligation to collect tax from you under section 52. So under section 52, there are some people whose job, who are legally under compulsion to collect tax at source. Then this supplier, now if Mr. A is the supplier supplying goods to Mr. C, a consumer, through Flipkart, through ECO, and if on this supply, this ECO is under obligation to collect tax at source from Mr. A, then Mr. A cannot ask for composition levy scheme. It's not available. And last case, if the registered person is engaged in supply of services other than restaurant service. Because if you remember, under normal case of composition levy scheme, only restaurant service is covered, but there are lakhs of services. Interior designing is also a service. Actors are also providing their services. Fashion designing is also a service. Hair cutting is also a service. And sweeper is also providing a service. Teachers are also providing the services. So there are lakhs of services. Other than restaurant service, if you are engaged in supplying of services, then you also cannot opt for composition levy scheme, because initially this composition levy scheme was only on supply of goods, not of services. But we have made so many amendments now. That is why some services have started come now. So what is that amendment? Exception. So what this 7th point means? 7th point says that if you are a supplier of any service other than restaurant service, then you cannot opt for normal case of composition levy scheme. But we have an exception that in some case you can opt for. Exception means what? That in some case, even if you are supplying this service other than restaurant service, then you can opt for composition levy scheme. There is no problem. And what is that exception technically? Before explaining the exception, I would like to explain an example so that you can understand. Now, a very common example is electricity shop. Now, if I want to purchase a geyser, for example, the cost of geyser is 10,000 rupees. But I do not know how to install the geyser. I need the services of electrician also. So I will not go to that shop which will only give me the geyser and not the electrician. So what I will do, I will ask for the electrician also. So suppose electrician also comes. An electrician will charge how much? For example, rupees 500. Now this is the total value of supply for that electricity shop owner. This is the income of electricity shop owner. Now if you read point number 7, then it makes the electricity shop owner ineligible for composition levy scheme normal case. Why? Because this person is engaged in supply of service which is electrician service other than the restaurant service. So it makes me ineligible. If I am the electricity shop owner, I am ineligible to opt for composition levy scheme normal case. But now there is a loss to me. In case I don't supply electrician, my geyser also will not be sold. No one will buy the geyser. Until unless that person will himself install the geyser, no one will buy the geyser. So why there was a penalty on me? Indirectly there was a penalty on me that I was excluded from composition levy scheme. Because I say that as an electricity shop owner, what is my point of view? That it is necessary to supply some services to sell the products. And that is why government made an exception. Government says that, now with this example I will explain the exception also. Now what government says that no, you can supply these services also, there is no problem. Other than restaurant service, you can supply these services also. You can still avail the composition levy scheme normal cases, but there is a condition involved that we will check last year, or you can say preceding year. What government said? We will check preceding year aggregate turnover. They will check preceding year aggregate turnover. Now, for example, if preceding year aggregate turnover, for example, is 80 lakhs. So what government says? In current financial year, if in current financial year, if the value of supply of service is less than equal to higher of Higher of what? 5 lakh or 10% of preceding year or 10% of preceding year aggregate turnover. Then also you can opt for composition levy scheme. What do I mean by this? Now in this example, if you can see on an average, how much is the percentage of service? 500 divided by 10 500 into 100 on an average. On an average, how much is this percentage? On an average, it is 4.76. On an average, (4.76). On an average, it is 4.76. So government says it is genuine. Government says on an average, when you compare your total service and total goods, it is only 4.76%. Remaining is the goods only. Government says that this percentage, if it is till 10%, then also there is no problem. That is why it says till 10%. But if you are doing such a if you are doing the sales or supply of such a value where your service component is more than 10%, then government says in that case we will say that your services are having substantial portion and you become ineligible for normal case of composition levy scheme. Now continuing this example, now what is the point here? 5 lakh fixed and 8% of preceding turnover becomes 8 lakh. So which is higher, 5 lakh or 8 lakh? 8 lakh is higher. That means in current financial year, 2021, I can opt for normal case of composition levy scheme. I can opt for normal case of composition levy scheme if service supply value, if service supply is less than equal to 8 lakh rupees. The moment it exceeds 8 lakh, I become ineligible to opt for composition levy scheme. Logically, this normal case of composition levy scheme was only for supply of goods and only one service, restaurant service. But because of some genuine people excluded, government says that okay, you can supply the other services also, but in that case the amount of that supply should not exceed or must not exceed 5 lakh or 10% of last year's turnover, whichever is higher. So if current year supply exceeds that 10% of this value, then you become ineligible. Otherwise, you remain eligible to opt for composition levy scheme. These are the 7 points which I have discussed, where you are ineligible to opt for composition levy scheme. If these are clear, please raise your hand. If you have any doubt, you can please ask me. If these points are clear, you can please raise your hand. Okay. Now let me continue the discussion. Now normal scheme is over. Normal scheme is over. So normal case, you can say. Normal case is covered under 2 sections, 10.1 and 10.2. This is over. Now let me discuss with you special case, which is 10.2a. It is special case. Now now this is over. So I'm ignoring now because it is over, completed. So let me discuss this case now. Now, initially, the normal case covers only goods supply and some services up to some limit, as I have shown. Other than rest, now normal case covers all supply of goods except some like pan masala or something. It covers restaurant service without any limit. But other than restaurant service, other services are also covered, but that have some limit, 5 lakh or 10% of last year's turnover. If my service value exceeds this value, then I become ineligible under normal case. So to cover all these services without limit, this special case come into picture. This special case, section 10 subsection 2a is what? Is nothing but to cover all services. So the purpose of this is to cover, all services without any limit. To cover all services, this was the purpose, without any limit, of 10% or 5 lakh, etc. This is only to make you understand that without imposing that limit. Now intention was to cover services, but now even goods are covered. Intention was to cover all services, but even if the conditions are satisfied, even if you are engaged in supply of goods, you can still be covered under special case. So the purpose was to bring service, but by default, goods are also covered here. So let me show you the act now, that what 10(2)(a) says, then I will simplify it. Now this is 10(2)(a) and let me read it for you. Then I will simplify the language. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in this act, that it does not matter what other sections of the act says. What section 10 subsection 2 says is supreme. It is final. But subject to the provisions of subsection 3 and 4 of section 9. These are reverse charge cases. So this section 10 subsection 2 is superior to all other sections but inferior to section 9.3 and 9.4 of the CGST Act, which deals with the reverse charge mechanism cases. A registered person not eligible to opt to pay a tax under subsection 1 and subsection 2. Now this is clear. A registered person not eligible to opt to pay tax under subsection 1 and subsection 2. Now which section is going on? Section 10 is going on. So these subsections are of section 10. Now you can opt for special case of composition levy scheme only and only if you are not eligible to opt for normal cases. That means directly you cannot come and apply special case of composition levy scheme. First of all, you have to read whether you are covered under normal case of composition levy scheme or not. If you are ineligible under normal case of composition levy scheme, only then you are eligible here. So special case is only for those who are not eligible under normal case. This is what the meaning of this line. Whose aggregate turnover in the preceding financial did not exceed 50 lakh rupees. In normal case, the limit is 1.50 crore or 75 lakh as the case may be, but now here the limit is only 50 crore. May opt to pay in lieu of the tax payable by him under section 1 of section 9. That means rather than paying the tax as per the GST rate applicable as a supplier of goods or services, you can pay the tax under this special scheme. An amount of tax calculated at such rate as may be prescribed but not exceeding 3% of the turnover in state or UT. So here the tax rate is how much? 3% central tax, and the equal amount is state tax or union territory tax. So the total GST rate becomes 6%. This is what the maximum. And currently, whatever is maximum is currently prescribed also the same rate. So let me simplify that language now. That what this special scheme is all about. So what is this special scheme all about? Applicability. So can you tell me now when it is applicable, when this special scheme is applicable? So I will call it as special case. When it is applicable, when you are a registered person, the supplier must be a registered person. This is one point. Second point is what? He is not eligible. This is second point. Not eligible to opt for normal case of composition levy scheme. Not eligible to opt for normal case. And third, his aggregate turnover of preceding financial year does not exceed rupees 50 lakh. Then he can opt. Then he can opt for this scheme, and here the tax rate is, he can opt, and the CGST rate is 3%, and the equal amount of state tax or union territory tax is also applicable, which makes the total GST rate as 6%. This is what this special scheme. I hope special scheme is also clear to you. Now, just like in normal cases when the person is not eligible, here also we have some cases. So when a registered person is not eligible, when does a registered person not eligible? To opt for special case of composition levy scheme. So when you cannot opt for special case of composition levy scheme, now let me tell you, there are some points which are same, which were there in the normal case. These are also applicable here. That means when you are engaged in outward supply, then neither you can opt for normal case nor you can opt for special case. This is one point. Similarly, when you are a casual taxable person, in special case also, then that option is not available. For a non-resident taxable person also, option of special case not available. When you are engaged in supply of those goods and services which are not leviable to central tax, special case also is not available. So these 4 points are same for normal case or special case. Fifth is also same. When you are engaged in supply of these notified goods, you cannot avail normal case, you cannot avail special case of composition levy scheme. Sixth point is also same. When you are supplying the goods through ECO, on which ECO is liable to collect tax at source, then also you are not eligible. Now seventh is not available here. So technically, which are those points which are same when you are not available? When you are engaged in supply those goods which are not leviable to CGST. Those goods or services, here goods and services both are covered. Not leviable to CGST, you cannot avail special case. When you are a casual taxable person, you cannot avail this special case. When you are a non-resident taxable person, you cannot avail this special case. When you are engaged in outward interstate supply of goods or services, then also you are not eligible for special case. When you are engaged in supply of notified goods like pan masala, tobacco, aerated water, ice cream, same thing, not eligible. Sixth, when you are engaged in supply of goods through ECO, electronic commerce operator, and where ECO is liable to collect tax at source, then also you are not eligible. So these 6 points are same. normal and special case of composition levy scheme. One point is new. When you are engaged in supply of notified services, there are some services which are notified, on which you cannot opt for special case of composition levy scheme, but till today there is no such notified service, but government has a right to notify these services later on. Now act says that there can be some services on which we will not allow this special case of composition levy scheme, so you have to learn this point. But currently there is no such example which I can give that in this supply of service you cannot avail this special case of composition levy scheme, but act says there is a provision that anytime services can be notified on which you cannot avail special case of composition levy scheme. Now I think that's sufficient for today, and that's all from my side. In the next class I will discuss with you what some restrictions if you avail the composition levy scheme, then what are the restrictions I will discuss in the next class. What are the limitations of this scheme, because if government is giving you so much freedom that you can pay the tax only at 2.5% or 1%, then government will also impose some limitations on you, that what you cannot avail now, etc, etc. So this I will discuss in the next class, and in the next class I will wind up composition levy scheme. So that's all from my side for today. We will meet tomorrow now. In case you have any problem, you can ask me. Goodbye for the time being.